Hi, welcome to week 4 of First Trinity's All Church Study, Winning the War in Your Mind. I can't even believe it's the last week. Well, so far we've learned these tools: how to replace lies with truth, how to rewire our brains from the ruts of negative thinking, and how to reframe what's happening in and around us according to God's truth. So today is our 4th and final tool. And remember, this is all geared toward helping us do what Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians. You've heard this verse before, but probably a good idea to remind ourselves what this is all about. Here's what he says: "We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ." What Groeschel is helping us understand in this book is that there is a war going on in our mind, and we want to win that war by the Holy Spirit's power, and he gives us some tools to do that. So today's tool is the rejoice principle. And he says when we practice the rejoice principle, we revive our lives and reclaim them. So very excited about that. Hey, I wonder if you have noticed something that I have noticed in Groeschel's writing. I have to say it's one of my most pleasant surprises about the book, which I really like all of the book. But I think it's so cool how honest Craig Groeschel is about his own struggles. Prior to this, I have watched many sermons and teachings by him. There's a page in the front of this book that lists the more than a dozen books that he's written. Very accomplished man and servant of God. It's so refreshing and encouraging to hear him be honest about where God has helped him with his issues. I think it's important to remember that we all struggle and to admit that. I don't know exactly why, except probably the devil, but I have noticed that we get the idea sometimes that church is for people who kind of have it all together. And we compare our insides with its struggles to people's outsides, which is never a good idea. I would love for church, and especially First Trinity, to be a place where we can be honest with each other about our struggles and where we need to grow and what our stuff is, and then together turn towards Jesus, who is the one who can bring true change and flourishing to our lives. If you haven't yet read the afterword by Groeschel's wife Amy, I really want to encourage you to do that. It's only 3 pages long, starts on page 209. It's pretty awesome. She talks about watching God help Craig grow in this area of winning the war in his mind and what a difference she's seen in him. Now, I have been really interested in the last couple years about some of the stuff that's out about brain science, and there's even particularly some stuff out about brain science and spiritual growth. So I love it when Groeschel talks about that stuff. And in this section, he talks about our amygdala. We all have an amygdala. It's a little almond-shaped part of our brain that is responsible for emotions and survival. And God put our amygdala in our brains to keep us safe when danger approaches. So if you saw your child run out into the street into oncoming traffic, your amygdala's triggers a big shot of adrenaline, which gives you the speed and power to race out and grab your child and keep your kid safe. Way to go, amygdala. However, the amygdala is not picky about how it responds to stimulus. This is what that means. Brain science now bears out that your amygdala doesn't really know the difference between your child running into the street and a notification letting you know that your bank account is overdrawn. If you feel anxious or scared, you get that same shot of adrenaline, even though you don't need it, which means the adrenaline kind of hangs around in your body and makes you feel on edge and stressed out. I bet you can think of times when you've felt that way. Groeschel says, and I love this, I think he's kind of a funny guy. Groeschel says, think of your amygdala as your twitchy, amped up, over-caffeinated, overstimulated, always on edge, high blood pressure cousin hanging around. It's actually a physiological thing, and it leads to what Groeschel names as panic. I thought about this and where I've experienced that in my life, and one story came into my mind, and that is when I was a little kid, we lived in Minnesota, and my favorite movie was The Wizard of Oz. And back in the day, it was only on one night a year at one time a year, and so we'd get to stay up late, we'd get in our pajamas, we'd watch The Wizard of Oz. And I know a lot of people were really scared by the flying monkeys. If you've never watched The Wizard of Oz, you should take a look. There's flying monkeys who are scary, but that wasn't the scariest part for me. Scariest part for me happened right in the beginning when the tornado hits Kansas, because the house where Dorothy lived actually spins up in the air, and she's in the house while it's spinning in the air and before it lands in Oz. And I always thought that was kind of terrifying. And in Minnesota, we had tornadoes sometimes. And so there'd be tornado warnings. And I remember there was this one particular time where I was in the bathtub. I don't know, I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. I was in the bathtub and enjoying my bath, and my mom came in, and I could tell she was kind of in a hurry, and she said, "You need to get out of the bathtub right now." And she kind of yanked me up by my arm, dried me off real quick, and we went downstairs because there was a tornado warning. So we hung out in the basement, and there was something about the combination of the scene in The Wizard of Oz and the way my mom acted, and actually, in retrospect, it's more the way I responded to how she was reacting, but it felt scary to me. And from that time on, even today, if I hear that little, and we don't have tornadoes in Buffalo, but there's that little test thing where on TV, I don't even know if they do that anymore, but that test thing on TV where they go, beep, 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 I actually feel my heart start to race a little bit, and it's crazy. It doesn't even make sense, but that's my amygdala at work because I don't feel safe at that point. Now, what's interesting is Groeschel says the tool here to help us win this part of the war in our mind is prayer. Now, on one level, of course we would say prayer, right? We're Christians. We're a church. We want you to pray. But I'd like to push on that a little more. I mean, maybe you're like me. I have experienced this amygdala panic that Groeschel talks about, and immediately here's what I do. I talk sternly to myself. Stop it. You're fine. There's nothing going on. There's no tornadoes in Buffalo. What is wrong with you? Shape up. You're safe. Now, the tool for this kind of panic that Groeschel is suggesting is not a stern talking to, even to yourself. He says that we should talk to God even when our fears don't seem reasonable to us, even when it's not logical. I try to use logic and reason to talk myself out of the panic. But sometimes I don't talk to God because I feel like I shouldn't be feeling this way. Does that ever happen to you? Without realizing it, I'm erecting a wall between God and myself that says, I'll only talk to him about what I deem are legitimate thoughts or feelings or actions. I try to clean myself up before coming to him. Okay, I'm going to tell another Zami story because it really does remind me of this. So when Zami was a puppy, maybe he was 1 or 2 years old, I took him to some training. I paid the big bucks, and it was an individual training. We got to go 3 times, and we met with this young woman. She was awesome. And the first time we met, we went to their place, and of course, Zami was nervous because he had never been there before. And this young woman asked me if Zami could do any commands, and I said, yes, he can. And I put him down, and I said, sit. And Zami's doing this. But he sat, oh, shaking, shaking. I said, down. Oh, he goes down. And we did a few more things. And this trainer said to me, do you force him to greet people? I said, yes, because I want to have a good dog who does what I say. She said, she shook her head like this, and she said, ma'am, Zami is giving you signals that he is very frightened. And whether it makes sense to you or not, your job is to comfort him and lead him when he's frightened. Oh boy. I thought my job was to make Zami behave. And this young woman said, nope, your job is to take care of him, and then that's how you'll teach him how to behave. Can you get down, buddy? Down. Well, friends, I think this is the exact kind of mess that we get into with God. Our job, when we are feeling frightened or stressed out, whether it makes sense or not, is to talk to our loving Father about it. Groeschel says it this way: if it's big enough to worry about, it's big enough to pray about. If it's on your mind, it's on God's heart. So instead of cleaning ourselves up before we come to God, let's start practicing continuously talking with him. Coming messy is a way I have heard it talked about. It's our job to turn to God, and it's his work to comfort us and to lead us. Friends, I want to close today by having us all read something together out loud. It's in your book, but I also printed it on your handout, had it printed on your handout. If you don't have a handout and you have a book, it's on page 166. With one caveat, we're not going to read the part that has parentheses around it in the book. But if you can find your handout and it says read together on this section, and I just want to say, as we read this, I have been praying for you. I have been praying that God will make it so clear to you that he is with you, that his Spirit's power will continue to help you win the war in your mind. He's good, he's gracious, and he loves you. You ready? Let's read this together. The Lord is close. He is near. He will never leave me nor forsake me. Nothing can separate me from his love. He is always with me. I am never alone, and he is enough for me. His strength sustains me. He watches over me, and he guides me with his loving eye upon me. God is close, and he wants to draw me close. I will lean into him and listen for his whisper. Blessings on your conversations with your group, friends, and the Lord bless you and keep you. Thanks.